promotions, commotions, and a whole lot of devotions. Lucrute. To say today was different would be putting it lightly. What I had expected to happen today after heading to the guild hall was to meet up with Peter and Dine, who usually arrived at the guild around the same time, while Nina and Kasha would show up together soon after that. What happened instead was that I arrived at the guild to find Peter and Dine chatting animatedly with a girl in green. It was when I got closer that I was finally able to get a good look at the girl. Nina? I questioned as I examined the very feminine attire that she was wearing in comparison to the regular outfit that I was used to seeing. Additionally, it was quite obvious that she took a lot of inspiration from Kasha's attire with a flair of Nina's own inserted into it. Either way, the others finally noticed my arrival, with Nina looking a little nervous as I approached. Morning, Lucrute. As you can see, I decided to change up my outfit. What do you think? She asked while avoiding eye contact with me. I smirked at how, even with an extreme change in appearance, it was still the little Nina that I knew under it. You look great, Nina, I said as I walked over and patted her on the shoulder, though, if nobody knew that you were Kasha's student before, they'll definitely know now. Kasha told me that as well. Nina replied, causing me to chuckle. Of course Kasha said that. She did like showing off, and Nina was her student who she would obviously like to show to the world. You know, guys, I feel like our team is going to look fashionably mismatched to everyone that sees us. Kasha and Nina, especially with that new staff of hers, will make the rest of us look like slobs in comparison, I joked with a laugh. That might be true for you, but I'm fairly certain that I look good enough to fit in with the fashionable duo of Kasha and Nina. Peter retorted with a grin. My counter to both of your arguments is that I could care less about fashion. Dine interrupted, I once spent 3 months in the wild in only a bearskin kilt. Though, I guess one could consider it a very fashionable kilt. I don't know, are you sure you weren't mistaking bearskin for your normal body hair? I asked. Dine stroked his beard in though before responding dryly, who knows? I'm not entirely sure myself. The 4 of us burst out laughing at his answer. Eventually, we managed to calm ourselves down enough to speak again. While our young mage was here, where was Kasha hiding right now? So, Nina, almost all of us are here. You know where Kasha is? I don't see her with us. I asked. I was actually going to ask if any of you had seen her at the guild. Meepo told Taya and I that Kasha had been called early to the guild this morning, but she didn't come back to the inn, so I assumed she was still here. Nina replied. I looked at Peter and Dine, who both shrugged their shoulders in response. We didn't see her here when we arrived either. Not sure on where she could have gone. Peter replied. That was very odd. Where could our resident beautiful sorceress have gone off to? Maybe we should ask around. Peter didn't get to finish his suggestion as I noticed a pretty redhead in the guild uniform approach us. I knew this redhead to be the one that Peter had interest in, Helena. And, from how her teal eyes looked at Peter while red filled her pale cheeks, it was quite obvious the feeling was mutual. Dine and I have been watching Peter's dynamic with the girl, and all I could say is that it was painful to watch how awkward they seemed to dance around one another. Good morning, Peter. Helena greeted, making said warrior's eyes widen as he quickly turned around with a smile. Hello, Helena. You're looking good today. Peter responded, the normal confidence of our leader jumping out the window at the sight of the secretary. Thank you, Peter. So do you. She replied, the blush on her face growing brighter. Guildmaster Einsack wished to see you and your team when you all arrived. I don't believe you're in trouble, so you shouldn't be worried. That's good to hear. I guess that we should probably start heading to Pluton's office then. Peter remarked. Dine, Nina, and I started walking towards Pluton's office. Peter almost went to join us when he stopped mid-step in hesitation and instead looked to Helena. Is there something else that you need, Peter? Helena asked. Well, I was wondering. By now, the 3 of us stopped walking and now focused on our team leader's interaction. Do you happen to have any plans for dinner tonight? I don't. My shift ends in 8 hours. Then, she surprised all of us by standing on her toes and pecking Peter on the cheek. Our leader then stood still in surprise as Helena quickly ran off with a wide grin on her face. With a dopey smile, Peter finally turned to us all and raised his fists in the air in celebration while the three of us gave him congratulatory clapping as he rejoined us. At least he finally grew a pair to ask Helena out. Seems like you're the love-struck idiot in our group for once, I teased while patting him on the shoulder. Guess I am. He accepted without any retort in response. Seems that the emotional high took away his bark for once. Tables have turned now, Pete. I'm glad to see you finally mustered up the courage to ask Helena out, Nina said with a smile. I just decided to take the chance since she was right there. Also, nearly dying made me realize that life is too short to wait for something to happen. Peter replied. Yeah, our brush with death put a lot of things into perspective. At least you finally did it. Thought I was going to die of old age before you tried to make a move. Dine added as we started walking to Pluton's office. At least you can die now without that regret on your mind. Now, you'll just have to hope to die after seeing our dear leader get married, I stated. Dine looked over to me before shrugging his shoulders. From the rate that it took Peter to ask out Helena, I'll be a skeleton before that happens. I believe that you're both thinking too far ahead on something like that, Nina said with a giggle. The wise think about events of the future, not just present. It's just that, in this case, thinking about the future tends to embarrass two of my friends. Dine remarked in amusement. Our druid being in a comedic mood was never good for my dignity. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. You aren't immune to teasing either, Lucrute. Kasha has you read like an open book. You end up freezing whenever she starts teasing you. I fear that you'll either die of a heart attack if she kisses you or turn into a living statue if the pair of you become a couple. I wanted to argue with him, but considering all the evidence, he was right. Yeah, well, I can definitely prove you wrong. I countered. I could definitely remain focused and moving were Kasha to tease me again. Even if she said something with that sultry voice of hers while gazing at me with those beautiful orange eyes that you could just get lost in. Damn. Tell you what, I'll bet you a silver that you won't reciprocate if Kasha teases you again. Dine then glanced at Nina and Peter. You two also want in on this? I'll match that bet. Peter answered with a grin. I think that I'll also match it, Nina said with a moment's thought. Great, if Nina was confident about this, then I might be doomed. Fine. I'm going to prove all of you wrong and get richer from it. I confidently promised. The three traitors looked at me with unbelieving eyes as I pulled open the door to Pluton's office and the four of us walked in. Good morning Nina, is that you? Pluton asked with a confused expression. I was a little impressed on how quickly he managed to recognize Nina. Yes, sir. I'm actually a girl. Our little mage answered nervously. Pluton's face soon settled back to being serious. Guess I'll need to have the guild update your information, he remarked aloud. Then, he gestured for us to come closer, which we silently complied with. Now, I bet that the four of you are probably wondering where your teammate Kasha is? Yeah. We heard that she had been summoned to the guild earlier, but we didn't see her when we arrived. Peter answered for us. Pluton rested his elbows onto his desk before interlacing his fingers in front of his face. What I will say next to the four of you must not leave this room. It could cause a panic. Do you understand? I felt my breath hitch as Pluton said this. What happened? Is Kasha safe? I noticed from the corner of my eye that while Peter and Dine also showed worry, Nina seemed to be a lot more terrified. Almost like she knew something we didn't. We understand, sir. Peter replied. Last night, a large group of adventurers went to subjugate a cave that had been discovered to be the base of bandits. Only one survivor managed to escape the slaughter that occurred. Slaughter? I asked, my worries growing greater and greater. Yes. It turns out that the adventurers had come to the cave at the same time that a vampire had just finished butchering everyone inside. By the gods! Vampires were rare, so rare in fact, that to encounter one by accident was just universally bad luck. Some places even considered them to be myths, and they might even be right if it weren't for stories of new attacks that would be heard every once in a while. Vampires are a species that have been hunted for years due to how most of them would go on rampages and slaughter whole villages of humans if allowed to. In addition, a single bite would put you under their thrall, easily allowing a vampire to build up an army. The only vampires that lived these days were either smart enough to stay hidden or so powerful that they didn't need to. It didn't help that vampires got stronger the older they became. Copper and silver-plate adventurers had absolutely no chance of surviving an encounter with a vampire. Even a young vampire could rip through a group of either rank with little effort. Gold and platinum plates weren't much better. At that rank, you were more likely to escape with your life than to actually beat a vampire. It was at mithril plate that a person had even odds against a vampire, and that was with a group. Orichalcum and adamantite plates could take on vampires with good odds of beating them in a group. Now, the only question was what involved Kasha with a vampire? Kasha, due to recommendation from Guildmaster Theo Riksha, was promoted to mithril plate today. At the same time, I summoned all mithril plates that were within the city to deal with this vampire. It was during this meeting that I had with all of them that Kasha brought in 2 associates of hers that had experience with this vampire before from their home country. Associates? Nina asked for us since Kasha hadn't told us of any associates she had in this country. While I tried to hide it, I felt a mixture of disappointment and slight jealousy at hearing about her working with others. It was stupid and childish, but I just couldn't help it. They are newer members of the guild. A man named Moman and a woman named Nobbe. From what I learned, this vampire, named Bathory, is extremely powerful. Enough so that she had apparently fed on an entire city that Moman used to call home. Additionally, we were told that Kasha, Moman, and Nobbe were the only ones that stood a chance of beating Bathory. They refused anyone else to come along and join them. The 3 of them left the city soon after the meeting to slay Bathory. Pluton finished. I know that Kasha is powerful, she admitted it herself. But even with magical protections, if a vampire got into melee distance, she'd likely be torn apart. Damn it. Why am I too weak? She didn't even bother to tell us, most likely in an effort to protect us. Something that she's been doing since we met her. She needed someone to protect her in return. And I couldn't do that because of how damn weak I am. All I could do against Clementine was stand there and listen to my friends get cut apart. All I do against a vampire is get sucked dry of blood or wait for Kasha to save me. I could feel my fist curling in frustration at how useless I've been recently. I need more strength to protect my friends, to protect and be an equal to Kasha. I need more power. And where will you get it, boy? I was pushed out of my thoughts when I heard that voice. Something horrifically ancient and inhuman. And, looking at the others, I was able to tell that none of them heard it like I did. What was that? Or was I just hearing things? That she will be back? I finally focused back on the conversation, unaware of what I may have missed. I couldn't tell you. While the trip to the cave is less than a day, a fight between Bathory and Kasha, Moman, and Nobbe could take much longer. We leave it in the hands of the gods at this point. I can only pray that they come back alive, even with the confidence that they sported about their success. Pluton answered Peter with a grim expression. Then there's nothing more we can do, Peter said in dejection, a feeling that I shared. Nothing more we can do but wait. It wasn't long after that we left Pluton's office and gathered at one of the empty tables together. That meeting put a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, I stated to the others. You won't find any argument from me on that. Sadly, there's not much we can do except wait and see what happens. Dine responded. Yeah, can't say it feels good knowing that we are being left behind. Frankly, I feel we'll need to do a lot of catching up if we don't want to be a hindrance to Kasha, Peter said, which I completely agreed with. For me, it's extremely easy to know the gap between Kasha and myself. Nina began, but at least it makes it easy to understand when I need to improve. But there was only so much that talk could take us, and I wanted to be alone for a bit to sort out my thoughts. I think I'll head off a bit earlier than usual. I don't exactly feel like taking a jog today, and I'd like to do some thinking. You guys fine with that? I announced while standing up from the table. The others were understanding of my reasons. Then we'll see you tomorrow? Diane asked. Of course. Can't leave you guys to have too much fun without me. I answered. Have fun with Helena tonight, Peter. I'll tell you how it went in the morning. Peter traded back, making me smile before I walked away from the others and out of the guild. At times like these, when I just wanted to think, I went out of the city to a small patch of trees on top of a hill to the west where I left a few targets to shoot at and practice. I like this little bit of sanctuary to myself where the only bit of noise comes from the animals around me, the winds blowing through the leaves of the trees, and twang of my bow followed by the thump of my arrow's impact. As I drew back my bowstring with an arrow knocked in place, I took a breath and held my position. The seconds ticked by, yet I still didn't move. My lungs became heavy as my body demanded air. The muscles in my arms, shoulders, and chest burned, but I remained as I was. Even more so, I pulled the bowstring back further in defiance to my body's wishes. And finally, when my vision was on the verge of swimming, I released the arrow and watched as it flew into the center of the wooden target, piercing through it and going 2 inches or so into the tree behind it. Yet, even with that perfect shot, I still wasn't satisfied. The arrow could go deeper. All these years of practice and I could still only go a few inches deep. I should be able to fire an arrow through the target and the tree. Knocking another arrow, I fired it at the first, splitting apart the shaft of the prior arrow and pushing the first arrowhead deeper into the tree. That's still not good enough. Knocking another arrow, I fired again. Thump. Not good enough. Still not through the tree. Thump. I should be better. Thump. I need to be better. So, I don't just stand frozen and listen to my friends dying. Thump. I was a failure. I was useless. I did nothing and couldn't save anyone. Thump. Not Nina. Thump. Not Dine. Not Peter. Thump. Thump. And especially not Kasha. Thump. Crack. My bow exploded into multiple pieces as I had to look away with my eyes closed to prevent any wooden shards from blinding me. When I looked back, my left hand was bleeding from a wooden shard that had entered it while part of my jacket sleeve was ripped from the snapped bowstring whipping across it. I grimaced, both from the pain, as well as the realization that my trusty bow, which I had gone on so many adventures with and had become attached to, was nothing more than broken pieces. Gently, I pulled out the wooden shard in my hand and pulled out a bottle of a healing potion from my satchel before uncorking it with my teeth and pouring the blue liquid onto my injured hand, washing away some of the blood. I watched as my wound slowly closed itself until only a small ache remained. Looking up to the target, I noticed that while the last arrow was a few inches deeper than before, it still hadn't gone through the tree. Fuck. I lost multiple arrows, a healing potion, and my bow for this to be my result? All that came from all of my effort was a few inches of progress. Screaming out in rage, I punched the ground in frustration multiple times, barely noticing the pain from it. I just wanted to hit something. Breaking my arrows, my bow, and myself barely produced a tangible result. I need more strength. I need more power. Once again, I ask, where would you get it, boy? That ancient voice spoke once again. I didn't get long to contemplate it as the horizon lit up with a pillar of light from the sky, followed by a beam of light that shot off across the horizon. They remained for a few seconds more until fading away to nothing. That wasn't just magic. I know and have seen enough magic to know that that wasn't just a spell. That was godly. And it was in the direction that Kasha had gone to fight that vampire. My eyes widened as I got off my feet and was about to start running towards Kasha, because I knew it had to be her involved with that. I had to get to her. And then what? Get in the way? Force your love to protect you? Die? You are too weak, boy. Those words halted my steps, then I snarled in rage, and what do you know? I shouted in anger at the air at this voice that I could hear while others couldn't. I know of power. I've eaten its roots, gnawed its bark, drank its sap. And I know the feeling of being held back. To be restricted by chains of metal, fate, and innate limitations. The voice roared and thrashed as it coiled in my mind, but then it settled, and I felt the attention of something enormous and incomprehensible weighing down upon me. If you're so powerful, then why are you talking to me? I'm just an average archer who couldn't even help his friends when they needed him, I demanded before once again remembering my own uselessness. I had power, then it was taken. I was bound by ancient roots, broken into pieces, forced to watch as infants played with my shards like toys. I was forced into slumber, dreaming of revenge. But then I woke. You called to me, I called to you? Yes, boy. You called to me. You desired power, you still desire it. You desire to protect your friends, to keep your lover safe, to become as strong as her. This voice was right. I don't want to hold any of them back, especially not Kasha. That is all I want. Then I'd like to give you some power. A seed to start. One to nurture and tend to until your roots grow deep and strong. Your branches scrape the sky. Your leaves blot out the sun. Your tree shakes reality. What would you want in return? This sounds too good to be true. And it did. But then, I looked back at that arrow sticking out of the tree. All of my efforts for just a few inches. Power is its own reward. My reward is to see your strength grow. And your reward is to protect your loved ones. You do want to protect her, right? The image of her appeared, unbidden, in my mind. Her golden hair flowing around her. Those captivating orange eyes full of warmth and life. Her beautiful smile filled with joy. To keep her safe and happy. And then, the image changed to that night. Her smile gone, replaced by a frown marring her lips. Those orange eyes dulled as they filled with tears and sorrow. Her voice filled with pain as she wept. I didn't want to see her like that again. I didn't want her to be in so much pain. I wanted to protect her smile. My heart already knew what my answer would be. I want to keep her safe. I answered, looking down at my hands. Then take your seed and grow. The voice disappeared as the overwhelming presence finally lifted off of me. I almost thought that I may have been going insane. Then I felt a burning on my chest that caused me to cry out in pain as I fell to my knees gripping the area. I ripped my armor and jacket off and pried my shirt away to reveal my bare chest. To my horror, I found what looked to be the round shape of a glowing crimson tree seed, the size of my fist, embedded into my chest. I kept screaming, in both horror and pain, as the seed slowly sunk into my chest until I could no longer see its shape, only its unearthly crimson glow. Then, a pulse from my core rippled through my body as the glowing red formed into the symbol of a seed with small roots growing from it onto my chest. Finally, the glow faded away until it became a simple crimson. The pain finally ended there as I hunched over the ground with my hands supporting me as I breathed heavily. Sweat dripped down my brow as I felt my heart start to slow down to its regular beat. Looking down, I put a hand to this brand on my chest and started tracing the symbol with my fingers. If there wasn't any proof of the voice and its claims before, there was now. And that meant I could become so much stronger now. I would finally be able to protect Kasha. Unknown. Yes, grow strong. Let your roots spread out. Become greater and revel in it. And then, when you've finally ripened, I'll consume your roots. I'll rip off your bark. I'll drain your sap. And then, I'll reclaim what's mine. What they took from me. What these weaklings of this world claimed from their betters. What that skeleton hoarded with greed. What that fox flaunted with pride. Oh yes, she'd have an especially unique punishment with this boy at the helm. All that is required now is to wait. I've waited so long for this. What is a little time more? Kasha. Day 14. I felt so bored waiting at the tree line in my human form. I'd been up for a while now, especially since I spent some time going over a few of the recent changes that had occurred at Haven Lake. Namely, our new residents. Since yesterday, my copy had spent time migrating the lizard men of the Green Claw into the houses next to the lake with little issue. Shaziryu had been extremely helpful in the process as he was able to direct his people without argument since they all trusted in his judgment. It also led to my copy and I finally assembling a council of sorts. Mup had pretty much taken charge of most of the goblins, hobgoblins, ogres, and trolls. Part of it came from them all knowing him the longest. The other part was due to him having the ability to speak on their level and translate the more confusing concepts and instructions that they were given into simpler terms. I never knew that having a translator for idiots would be useful until I dealt with some of the dumber ogres and goblins. Alaya, the half-elf who I'd rescued from the brothel, found herself becoming a voice for the humans, elves, and half-elves of the village. Aside from those three races, she'd also spoke for a few goblins that had started learning baking from her. While they weren't the best bakers, they were certainly working on it. Finally, Shaziryu had become the obvious voice of the lizardmen. At the same time, Zarisu had a seat for two reasons. One was that he interacted with the widest number of races as a diplomat of sorts, even after his original tenure of diplomat in the village had ended. It was a pretty good system, especially because we received more and more goblins, ogres, and one new elf. Apparently, Rush, the only other full elf in the village, had found her after she managed to escape from her slavers, who were a group of people from the slain theocracy. Following that, Rush brought her back here. She didn't say much about how she escaped, probably traumatized about it. We did manage to get a name from her, Aurelian. Additionally, my copy informed me that she had finished summoning a few level 70 kitsune to act as bodyguards for all the people I ordered. The sane and logical side of my mind thought that having level 70s acting as glorified bodyguards was overkill. The instinctual and primal side felt that it wasn't enough. Both sides managed to agree that it would be best to wait and see if any other kitsune were needed. But currently, the protection detail would suffice as of now. After that, I watched one of the arena tourneys which ended with Zarisu winning again. From there, I had to take a few more ice baths to settle my urges before going to sleep. It was getting harder to control myself, and I hated that I might end up proving my copy right one day. How much longer would my body's biological betrayal last? If I was lucky, it would only be 3. But if I wasn't? I covered my head in my pillow and screamed in frustration. And that's what led to right now. Me alone, waiting for Momo to show up with Nabril. I wondered how the others were doing right now. Taya was likely on her shift at Selly's. Mipo would be watching Taya in addition to a kitsune. While it was probably overkill, at least Taya had 100 levels of protection between her. My team would either be taking a job right now, worrying about me, or wondering what I was doing. I hope that Nina/daughter is doing all right and isn't too upset at my sudden departure. I'd really have to make it up to all of them, especially my mate. I'd have to really make it up to him. I slapped myself back into sanity and leaned against a tree. Did this world have any form of contraceptive, normal or magical? Am I going to have to conjure up the magical equivalent of condoms in the future? I'm getting more and more worried that I'll end up entering some hormonal frenzy and sober up the next day pregnant with a little sibling for Nina. Closing my eyes once again, I started my counting meditation again. I managed to reach 139 before I smelled Momo and Nabril's arrival, followed by hearing their movements. Opening my eyes, I gave the two a smile. "Morning, Momo, Nabril." I greeted the pair. "Good morning, Lady Kasha." Nabril replied with a bow. "Hello, Kasha. Good news is that I was able to resurrect Shultir last night." Momo responded. I was glad that Momo managed to get a happy ending with all of this. "That's great to hear, Momo. Were you able to figure out what happened to cause Shultir's mind control? I asked. Unfortunately, no. Shultir couldn't recall any of the events that lead to her mind control or anything that happened afterwards. In addition, Demiurge couldn't find anyone that may have fit the description of fighting Shultir, yet. They may have used some form of invisibility to hide their presence, or they abandoned their injured or dead comrades and blended in with the local populace. Momo answered. Well, even if you couldn't find whoever did it, at least you have Shultir back. So, I consider that to be a win. I remarked. That may be so, but I can't let an assault on my subordinate go unanswered. I must find whoever did this and deal with them appropriately. I gave Momo a raised eyebrow at this. Momo, if you didn't find the culprits behind this, what would you do? I asked with some concern. I'd continue looking. No one can hide forever. I walked up to Momo and pushed myself higher up on my toes before rapping my knuckles against his helmet. He slightly shook his head in shock before looking down at me. What was that for? Momo, you're obsessing. The worst thing that you could do right now is let an unknown foe get into your head like this. Don't feed the trolls has always been a relevant saying that you are ignoring. Take the win, fortify your people and defenses, and be prepared for any further unseen event. But don't obsess over what you don't know or can't change, in this case, whoever mind-controlled Shultir. Even for an undead skeleton, I doubt that would be healthy for your sanity. Momo was silent for a bit before he finally answered, I'll take your advice into consideration. I only ask that you do, Skelly bro, I said while holding my fist out to him. He bumped it back with a nod. Onto other matters, shall we make our way back to Rantle? Momo asked. I'm ready when you are. I answered before perking up with a grin. Oh, I can even introduce you two to my friends while I'm at it. I'm pretty sure that you'll like them. As I said this, the three of us started walking back to the city. Seems like you are quite fond of these new friends of yours. What are they like? Momo asked with some amused mirth. Well, Peter is our team leader who does pretty well with making decisions in hectic situations. Peter has a strong character and is willing to get into the thick of a fight to draw attention from our ranged members. He also likes to make running bets with our other teammate, which leads me to Dine. Dine is our resident calm and earthly druid. He's a big guy who can appear extremely serious until he cracks a joke at the most unexpected moment. Then, there's my cute and adorable little apprentice, Nina the Emerald Mage. She can be very shy and easy to embarrass in front of new people, but I've been trying to work on building up her confidence. She's also quite smart and eager to learn new things, which makes showing her spells so much fun. She always gets this little expression of wonder in her eyes which, are you sure you're talking about your student at this point? Momo asked with a chuckle, you're starting to sound like a parent trying to show off their kid. I had the decency to look a little embarrassed at Momo's remark. Maybe I did ramble a little bit about her. I admitted. Anyway, onto the final member is Lucrute. I'm quite fond of my flatterer of an archer. He's very obviously infatuated with me. I just love to tease him since he reacts so uniquely to my flirtations. Really though, I'm thinking of taking him back to my place soon enough and... Kasha, Momonga said while shaking my shoulder and bringing me back to my senses. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Not really. How do my eyes look? I asked while showing him. They are fading from gold to orange. What's happening? I noticed that even Nabril was looking at me with some concern. I think that my body's time of the month is happening. And considering my race, I've been losing control of myself as time goes on. I've been taking a lot of ice baths, but it seems that it's only a delay tactic. I'm unsure of how long this cycle is going to continue, but I don't know if I'll be able to outlast it before. I trailed off with a red face. You decide to copulate with someone. And from the sound of it, you seem to have already made the choice on who. Momo answered. I really fucking hate these hormones, especially if I have to deal with this every damn month. I moaned out while rubbing my temples. I'm not ready to start taking care of a baby, yet. At this point, I'm not sure which of us has it worse. My emotions might be supernaturally dulled, but at least I don't have to worry about becoming a hormonal mess every month that risks getting pregnant. Momo contemplated, causing me to roll my eyes. How about we trade? You can become a horny skeleton each month with every bone but the one that matters, and I can become an emotionless kitsune with a negative sex drive. Momo put his hands between us in surrender. When you put it like that, I'll stick with my issues. Coward. I taunted, causing the both of us to laugh until Momo's curse kicked in. I really needed to figure out some way to fix that. Lady Kasha, if it's not beyond my place, I could try asking some others in Nazarick about methods to help with your predicament. I'm not certain of kitsune biology, but likely one of the other Pleiades or another inhabitant from the floors could be of assistance. My sister, Lupus Regina Beta, for instance, is a werewolf which might share enough commonality with kitsunes to be of use. Narbril nervously said with a light blush on her face. I gave the woman a thumbs up. That would be amazing, Nabi. Thank you, I said with a lot of appreciation. I don't know if the information would help or if I'd even get it before I lost control, but it was the thought that counted. You're welcome, Lady Kasha. After that embarrassing conversation, we spent a while longer walking until we finally made it back to the gates of Erantle. What annoyed me was that, upon getting close enough to the city, I started feeling that same warmth of worship growing within me. I made sure to have an illusion hide my eyes because I just knew that they'd be flashing like light bulbs at this point. I also did my best to hide reaction around Momo and Narbril since I really didn't want to bring up my other issues or reveal my demigoddess status to the pair. When we finally made it to the Adventurers Guild, the three of us entered the building and made our way to Pluton's office. Something I took note of was all the stares that the three of us were receiving, and they were definitely not the normal stares of lust or interest that I was used to. It was more like shock and awe. I didn't have long to contemplate this as we finally entered Pluton's office. Upon stepping inside, the three of us were greeted to Pluton in discussion with an obese man in expensive clothes that would probably be able to feed a peasant for a year. His face resembled a fat bulldog's. The only hair he had on his balding head were white wisps on the side and a tiny moustache and goatee. He reeked of oil, either secreted from his body or remnants of what he had eaten prior. This man was almost the stereotypical epitome of a fat and rich noble. Ah, Kasha, Moman, and Nobe. It's wonderful to see that you all managed to survive, Pluton said with a warmth that made me assume that he was too used to hearing news of adventurers dying. Even better, we managed to slay Bathory. She'll never be able to harm another person again. I answered with a smile. Excellent. I'll also go out on a limb and assume that the reports of massive lights in the distance from Erantle were all of your doing? Pluton asked. Indeed. Momo answered, while Kasha and Nobe added to the spell's power. I broke the sealing crystal containing the 8th tier spell that I had been holding and unleashed it upon Bathory. She was vaporized in the blast. That was when the noble broke out into a smile and began clapping excitedly. Wonderful, wonderful. Now I know that Pluton wasn't lying about his claims. I always loved hearing stories of powerful adventurers who go off to slay monsters, and now I'm actually meeting some, he stated with a childlike wonder. It would have been comical even, and anyone else might consider this man just a regular noble who found a new bauble to look at, but I knew better. There was a calculating intelligence in his eyes that his demeanor couldn't hide. He was planning something. Thank you. Though, I believe the three of us are at a loss since you know who we are but we can't say the same. I responded as friendly as possible. I don't know what game he is trying to play, but it's best to not let him know that I'm onto it. Oh, how rude of me. I usually have much better manners. He stood up and gave an exaggerated bow. My name Panasolii Gruesday Rettenmeyer. I'm the mayor of Erantle. I wish to say that I am humbly thankful for your service in protecting my city. You're welcome. Momo replied, but what brings the mayor of all people to the Adventurers Guild today? An excellent question. You see, as while the Adventurers Guild isn't affiliated with any single country, it does have methods that help to establish trust and cooperations with the cities that each guild branch is established in. Rankings are one of them. Panasoliai answered with a flourish of his hands and cane. Pluton seemed to grimace at the cringeworthy actions of the mayor, and I couldn't blame him. But he decided to speak up at this point. Yes, Lord Rettenmeyer is correct. Every rank, up to Mithril Plate, is decided solely by the Adventurers Guild. Once you get to Orichalcum and Adamantite, the decision needs to be made and agreed upon by both the Guildmaster along with the ruling authority in whatever city. This helps to curb on excessive promotions as there comes some weight and political power with Orichalcum and Adamantite ranks, and helps inform hosting countries of the strength of our guild members. Oh, I get it. It's meant to be a way for cities and such to be aware of if the guild branch in a hosted city had the ability to try and take over. That, and it put onto Orichalcum and Adamantite plates a giant neon sign saying, "Recruit this person into your country's military, immediately." And that's what leads us to you three. Panasoliai announced, with careful consideration, "I have agreed with Mr. Einsack to have the three of you promoted to Adamantite Plate. Congratulations," he said with a twirl of his staff before pointing the jeweled head of it to Pluton. "Let's give these three their new plates." "Oh, of course, Lord Rettenmeyer," he said, caught off guard and annoyed at Panasoliai's actions. Not that said man even seemed to notice. With that, Pluton reached into his desk and pulled open a drawer before taking out a box and setting it down onto the desk. He then opened the box and turned it to us, revealing three pristine plates of dark blue, almost black metal. It is always a privilege for a guildmaster to award an adamantite plate. You three are the first I've ever awarded with this in my entire tenure. I'm both honored and proud to do so now, Pluton said with complete sincerity. Momo, Nobe, and I walked over to the box and traded out our 2 copper plates and 1 mithril plate for the adamantite. "Thank you for this promotion," I said with a serious tone while internally, I was cheering for joy that I finally managed to get the highest rank in this guild in only 2 weeks. Wow, I really wonder how the others will react to this. Additionally, I wondered why they pushed us to adamantite plate instead of orichalcum. I think there might be something else going on that they just weren't telling us, but I decided to keep my opinions quiet and savor the moment. "We'll wear these with pride." Momo finished while Narbril gave a nod. "Now, aside from this, I also wish to award the 3 of you with 100 gold coins, each. The city of Rantel is in your debt, after all." As he said this, Pluton 3 weighty satchels of coins from behind his desk and set them down in front of us. "In addition, I plan to host a feast at my estate tomorrow night which all of you, as both adamantite plates and heroes of Rantel, are invited to along with any guests you might bring. I hope to see you there." He's trying to show off the new adamantites to the city while wining and dining us. I couldn't help but glance at Momo since going to a dinner event in a suit of armor likely wouldn't fly well. Even worse would be if he went as his normal skeletal self. I could just imagine him drinking wine and eating a boar leg and all of that food falling through the empty cavity that was his insides and just piling at his feet. "It would be a pleasure, Lord Rettenmeyer." Oh shit, Momo is seriously going to attend? I'm more interested in seeing how he manages to pull it off, like the main part of such an event, eating something. "If Momo wishes to attend, then I shall follow him," Narbril stated. I can't resist the offer of free food and drink being given so graciously. "Though, I believe I'll bring a guest with me," I answered. "Marvelous." He cheered while clapping excitedly. "I'll see you then, heroes of Rantel." With that, the fat noble left the room with a bit of a skip in his step. Upon the door finally closing, Pluton rubbed the bridge of his nose and sighed. "While today is one to celebrate, you 3 should take care to be careful now," Pluton warned. "Why is that?" Momo asked. "As you've become adamantite plates, that also means that you've entered into the realm of politics. Nobles and those in power will begin scheming around you 3. Panasoliai is no different. Be careful, because people will begin to watch your actions closely. We'll take that advice to heart. I replied. Guess the universe planned to push me into the political state with or without my consent. At the very least, I had the leader of one political party in this city under my command. Bless us with your wisdom and power, Fox Princess. I did my best to hide my reaction from everyone as my mind was assaulted by 15 people chanting prayers in my name. These magical nerds were really making me feel great. They are doing an amazing job at making me lose my goddamn mind. Hen, good luck on your continued adventures. I hope to continue witnessing your legends grow. Pluton finished as Momo and Nabril nodded. I quickly followed suit, wondering what I may have missed. We then exited the door of the office and came outside to bear witness to all the adventurers in the guild with their gazes fixed upon us. It was quiet enough to hear a pin drop in the room. That was when one adventurer started clapping, followed by another, followed by everyone else as they began cheering us. I guess that getting adamantite was something to celebrate in any guild hall considering how rare it was. That was when a familiar group of adventurers broke through the crowd, making me smile. Nina was the first to tackle me into a hug, followed by Lucrute, followed by Peter, and then finished by Dine. We heard from Pluton about everything. You really worried us all there, Lucrute said with a grin. I'm glad you came back to us, safe and sound. Nina admitted, I was worried when Pluton said you went off to fight some extremely powerful vampire. It'll take a little more than a single bloodsucker to take me down, I teased in response. Eventually, the four of them let me go and gave me a little room. And it seems that you came back with an adamantite plate in tow. Peter remarked, guess we'll need to work even harder to catch up to you. Wow, I've heard about adamantite, but I've never seen it in person. It's a lot darker than I imagined, Nina said while looking at the metal. And you two must be the ones that went with Kasha to fight that vampire. Thanks for watching her back, Peter said after noticing Momo and Nabril. Momo seemed a little thrown off at the gratitude directed towards him. Yes, well, Kasha protected me during the battle a lot more than I protected her. Momo responded humbly, thanks regardless for any aid you gave our friend. Then, Peter held out his hand to the tall skeleton, I'm Peter. Momo returned the gesture before replying, Momon. And this is my partner, Nobe. He gestured over to Nabril who gave a curt nod of her head. From what Kasha has said about you four, I'll assume that you, Momo nodded over to Dine, other one called Dine. That's right. Nice to meet you. Dine answered. He then nodded over to Nina. You must be Nina the Emerald Mage. This caused Nina's face to turn red before she looked over at me. Kasha, you really told him that name? She complained while the other guys snickered. I couldn't hide the smile of amusement on my face. Obviously. I can't let people think of you as plain old Nina. As your teacher, I know that you'll be famous soon enough. And you'll need a strong title to go with it. I answered with a laugh at my embarrassed little Emerald Mage. Then, Momo looked at Lucrute, and that would finally leave you, the one Kasha likes, Lucrute. Correct? My jaw just dropped while a blush filled my face as I looked at the skeletal idiot with, apparently, no filter. This dumb motherfucker. It didn't help that my friends immediately looked at me as I tried hiding my face in my hand. So, you really do like me, huh? Lucrute asked as he got closer. No. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes, you do. Maybe. Giving that small concession to my instinctual side allowed it to take a mile. What do you think, my silly archer? I think, if I wanted to, I could be the first person in all of Rantle to kiss an adamantite plate and survive the aftermath. He answered as he grew closer. Oh, is that a far-umph? I wasn't able to finish as my silly archer silenced my next words by pulling me in by my waist and kissing me. My eyes widened in shock for a moment, but then, I began leaning into it. I rested my arms on his shoulders and interlaced my fingers behind his neck. I could feel my tails writhe and twist in pleasure. I could hear some of the adventurers watching giving hoots and whistles. But I stopped paying attention when he started using tongue. He keeps up like this and I'll make sure that he lives up to the second syllable of his name. And then I finally managed to come back to my senses and realized that I was passionately making out with Lucrute. In front of everyone. I'm going to kill Momonga later for this when I had the chance, but for now, this wasn't exactly unpleasant. Finally, we broke apart for air and he rested his forehead against mine while gazing into my eyes. I probably looked like a tomato at this point to everyone that was watching, and considering that all the guild members were looking at us right now, that was a lot of people. Proved you wrong, huh? He teased with a satisfied smile. Gee, guess you did, Lucrute. I responded with heavy breaths. My heart was still thumping and hadn't managed to slow down yet. So, what would you say this makes us now? Lucrute asked. Good question. I know exactly what my instinctual side would say. And while I'm hesitant in all of this, I've pretty much realized that I'm getting fucked, one way or another. Might as well do it on my own terms at the wheel instead of the passenger's seat. That seemed to settle the instinctual side as it pulled back from where it had been pushing on my mind. It still makes me a sexy sorceress and you my love-struck archer. But I think I like that. I answered before taking control and kissing him back, much to the victorious roaring of my instinctual side. When we finished, he spoke with a voice full of mirth. I think that I could live with that. I then turned my attention to Momo and gave him a wide smile before telling him, in a sickly sweet voice, Momo, just so you know, I'm definitely going to find a way to pay you back for this. The second he understood what I meant, Momo immediately started pushing Nabril away from us. Time to leave, right now, Nobe. Master, what is? No time for questions. We need to go. Momo interrupted and rushed both her and himself out of the guild as fast as he could. I already knew what I wanted to do to him. His armor was going to be flashing like an RGB keyboard when I met him next. Enjoy your reputation as the Black Knight being destroyed. He'd be called the Glowing Rainbow Warrior when I was finished. I can already imagine it. His greatest feat would be his ability to light up a dark cave with obnoxious, ever-changing lighting. Those two certainly ran off in a hurry. Peter remarked. Momo just knew better, I said with a bit of an ominous tone. Right. Peter trailed off. I gave a look around at all the people still watching us and felt like it would be a good idea to go somewhere more private. I feel like we've given our co-workers enough of a show today. Want to head off somewhere with not as many listeners? I asked. We could always head back to the Hero's Respite. Should be pretty empty around this time of day. Dine answered. Then let's get going, shall we? I said with a grin. And that's what led us to start walking through the crowd of adventurers and out of the guild. Throughout that entire time, Lucrute had his arm wrapped around my waist with my body held close to his. It was as we walked that my nose also picked up a few things. One of which was that I could smell kitsune in the area. Looking around at a few locations that I could pinpoint, my eyes met with one kitsune keeping pace with us on a roof. Another on the opposite side disguised as a dog. A third above us in the form of a bird. And finally, I spotted a simple man with red hair streaked in blue along with blue eyes in shabby clothing. When I noticed him, he gave me a wink before melding away into the crowd. Yet, aside from the kitsune, the other thing strange that I smelled came from Lucrute himself. He smelled like a typical human, except for a strange scent that I could not identify, and considering how the knowledge of everything I smelled was essentially hardwired into my brain, that was throwing me off. I decided to push that thought to the side and just enjoy the moment right now. I got promoted, I was spending time with my team, Nina/daughter, and I guess you would call it my boyfriend, huh? That would take some getting used to. You look like you're deep in thought. Something on your mind? Lucrute asked. I gave the blonde archer a coquettish glance and smile. Why do you ask? Wondering if I'm thinking of you right now? I retorted. You could be, he said with a sly grin. I playfully flicked him on his forehead. Aren't you bold? For all you know, I have Nina on my mind, I said while pulling my surprised apprentice to my side. But that did make me wonder how long I would end up hiding my bestial traits from everyone. I could only do it so long while living with Nina and Tyre before they eventually figured out that I wasn't human, or I slipped up and they discovered that I was a lot fluffier than they thought. Kasha, don't drag me into your lover's spat. This is your problem, Nina said with a laugh. And unfortunately, you don't have a choice on if you want to be involved. Your lovely teacher requires the assistance of her precious apprentice. I dramatically proclaimed. Now, help your teacher win this argument. Wow, Kasha. Dine commented, it's quite low of you to drag others into your own troubles in paradise. The druid then began laughing with Peter in tow. It was at this point that I realized that this simple moment was one of the best I've had in this new life, possibly even my prior life. Just enjoying time with my friends that I never was able to have before. I think I would be satisfied living a simple life with all of these people. Sadly, I doubt events in my life at this point would ever allow for such simple living, but that made moments like these all the better. This wasn't just a game anymore. This team, my team, were people I don't think I could imagine living without being in my life at this point. That was why I was going to need to come clean to them sooner or later. But for now, holding Nina to my side while resting into his shoulder, I hummed in contentment. I could save talks like that for later. I'm allowed to be selfish every once in a while. May our goddess reign with power and the wisdom to wield it. And another reminder that my life could no longer be simple. It was a little while longer before we managed to arrive into my room at the Hero's Respite and entered my sanctuary. Instead of the cabin, I decided to conjure us a table and chairs in the garden to enjoy the artificial outdoors. Kasha, I think you miscounted. Peter remarked after everyone but I had sat down, you created a table for us but you only made 4 chairs. Oh, I had a reason for that. While I may have given up part of the game to both Lucrute and my instinctual side, I could still have some fun. No, I didn't. There are chairs for everyone here. As I said this, I made my way over to where Lucrute was sitting, used one of my invisible tails to slightly pull his chair back, then I sat in his lap. See, chairs for everyone. That doesn't seem like it would be productive for any talks we would have if they involved Lucrute. Dine remarked with a knowing glance. I don't know. I think it would be very productive. Leaning my head back to look up into Lucrute's brown eyes, I gave him a teasing smirk before wiggling my hips. What do you think? Think you'd be able to be productive? Hell no. The archer instantly admitted as I heard his heart thumping faster. Giggling at his answer, I conjured a chair next to him, wiggled my hips in his lap once more, then got off of his lap and sat in the chair I just conjured. I gave Lucrute a knowing look at how he was now crossing his legs. I win this round. Well, now that we all start talking, Kasha, Peter decided to proceed. Would you mind telling us what happened during your battle? Pretty much everyone in Rantle saw those 2 massive lights on the horizon. Even more is that pretty much all the adventurers knew that you, along with Moman and Nobbe, were involved, considering that someone let it slip that you all went off into that direction to fight something. I'll admit that it was probably one of the harder fights I've had since coming to this country, I said, deciding to, if not tell them the full truth, at least tell them a half-truth. The official version of events that we told Pluton was that we went out and fought the vampire we had been sent to kill. Moman had to break a sealing crystal containing powerful magic to unleash a massive blast, of which Nobbe and I added our magic to enhance it. She died after that. And the unofficial version of events? Nina eagerly asked. My first question before I answer that is if any of you could explain what those lights looked like when you saw them. I got a pretty good look at those lights since I was outside the city at the time. Lucrute spoke up. I saw a pillar of light descend from the sky at the same time as a massive beam of light streaked across the horizon. I couldn't even comprehend the amount of destruction that must have been occurred. You could almost say it was like an act from the gods. I noticed that there was something off in his eyes as he said this, almost like he was thinking of something else. Then, His eyes fell back to me and he seemed to lose a bit of that introspective glint in his eyes. You're right about the destruction. The field we encountered the vampire in is now a crater, while the forest behind it became a ravine stretching into the distance further than I could see. That pillar of light was Momon's doing. That beam, though, that was completely my own magic. That got everyone's attention as they looked at me in a new light. It was one thing to tell them that I can cast spells which could alter landscapes. It was another, entirely, to partially bear witness to it. When you told us before that you had spells that could rewrite maps, that was one of them? Nina asked with wide eyes. Yes. That was probably one of my most outright powerful and destructive spells, called Grand Catastrophe. I don't use it often because of how destructive it can be. It doesn't differentiate between friend or foe, the environment, anything at all, really. It is pure annihilation. And that was the truth. After seeing the consequences of casting that spell, I now know that it's something to be used as a last resort. In Yggdrasil, I could fire it and forget. The spell would create some programmed destruction but mainly just send out a wave of damage. Here? My actions would have lasting consequences that would scar the land. Where did you even learn a spell like that? Dine asked with a thoughtful expression. I learned it through conflict. Multiple territories in my homeland were not kind to the weak. Either you thrived or you died. Especially when large-scale wars occurred. Come to think of it, all the shenanigans that players in Yggdrasil typically got up to would be apocalyptic in an actual world like this. Players dropping meteors and raising undead armies in the span of minutes was relatively tame in normal PvP conflicts. In this new world, the plot to raise a simple army of the undead was considered city-destroying. God help them if a person used a large-scale instant deatho attack. But those magic attacks that were used by you and Momon did end up killing the vampire, right? Nina asked. No, she was still alive. I answered, causing all of them to immediately start asking questions. Relax, everyone. We did end up killing her. That, thankfully, calmed them all down. She survived our initial assault due to being a true vampire of immense power. She had an extreme factor of regeneration and healing that we had make her use up before we could finally finish her off. What I don't understand is why such a powerful being like that vampire was even wandering around close to Erantal. If even you were having such great issues putting the creature down, could there possibly be more creatures like it that might follow? Dine pondered with worry that wasn't exactly unfounded. I know that Momo's guild is here, with a multitude of powerful NPCs residing within it. There was also the possibility of other players and their NPCs who came in the past or came with mine and Momo's arrival here. What I know for certain is that this world's people are not ready for any battles between us otherworlders with each other, much less going into conflict against them. I couldn't tell you since I have no idea. What I do know is that this battle made me realize that I need to get you all stronger for any potentially powerful foes or chaotic events in the future. I announced to the others with a self-admittedly evil grin. How would you go about doing something like that? I mean, taking tough jobs can help one grow stronger, but there's a limit to it. Peter questioned while looking at me intently. Back home, there was a term we used for such a thing when one wanted to get stronger quickly. I plan to power farm your asses until I'm satisfied. I answered. Lucrute looked over to me with a cocked head and confused expression before asking, power farming? What does power have to do with harvesting crops? We won't be harvesting crops, my dear Lucrute. What I mean by the term farming is the process of repeatedly performing an action to cultivate a resource. Power farming is where you perform said definition to the absolute limit to cultivate a resource as fast as possible. In this case, they would be farming levels for me, since they were my crops in this metaphorical. And exactly what action would we be performing to the extreme? Nina asked nervously, a feeling shared by everyone else at the table. I couldn't help the evil giggling I released. You all are going to be training your abilities and fighting monsters non-stop for the foreseeable future. You'll wake up, run a mile, eat breakfast, receive individual training regimens for a few hours, fight enough monsters to earn lunch, train individually, fight more monsters to earn dinner, run another mile, and then you'll get to sleep. All of them looked at me wide-eyed and worried. Nina especially, since she knew how much I ran her ragged during her lessons with me. Are you even certain that this is possible? Peter asked. This is definitely possible, especially when I make sure that none of you run out of stamina or mana during our training sessions. Besides, your opinions are no longer a factor in this. All of you enjoy the break right now, because after tomorrow, your asses are all mine. Any questions? Is there anything that you'll want us to bring? Diane asked. Bring whatever you'd normally take with you on a job. Aside from that, I'll provide everything you'll need. I answered. Well, we were all planning on training to get stronger. At least our adamantite plate has a plan for us on how to do that. Peter spoke optimistically. We'll see how he feels after the first day. Diane gave a smile at Peter's reassurance. We can't just let Kasha leave us in the dust. I'm hopeful in seeing how far all of us can go. I just hope that we can survive what Kasha considers training. Nina remarked with the prior knowledge of what a small workout with me was like. At least we'll probably jump up a few ranks if we get through this alive. Then, I felt Lucrute grab my hand and I saw determination burning in his brown eyes. Kasha, I promise that I will get to your level of power. That way, you can let someone else shoulder your burdens instead of doing everything yourself. While I knew he made an almost impossible promise, I felt I could put at least a little faith into this dream of his. Having a goal to strive for was helpful in keeping oneself motivated. Then I'll be waiting for that day to happen, I replied. I was quickly surprised as he pulled me into a kiss and my mind went blank for a moment. My animalistic side made me moan in pleasure, much to my embarrassment. Long moments passed, then he pulled away with a hand cupping my cheek while giving me a boisterous grin. I won't make you wait long, my beautiful sorceress Tilda, he whispered to me. Claim him now. It's time to mark him as your own. Mount him. No, I'm in front of all my friends. I'm not an inhibition-less animal. I've ended up at first base, which is as far as I'm comfortable going right now, all things considered. I used to be a guy a few weeks ago and this was far from anything I considered in my life. Want. Now. No. I then shoved that primal hunger far away, aware that I couldn't do this forever. Kasha, I also have something for you, Lucrute said, pulling me out of my internal conflict. Why you do? I stuttered out, my mind still slowly coming back to me. It was originally meant to be a gift for your promotion to silver plate. But I guess we can change that to adamantite plate. The archer answered as he reached into the pouch on his hip and pulled out a small, silver cylindrical object with an orange jewel embedded in the center. What's this? I asked while accepting the object he placed in my hand. I took the time to examine the beautiful object and spotted small hinges on the side of it, but I couldn't tell what opened them. Lucrute pressed his finger on the orange jewel in the center, which caused the hinges to snap open. It's a dwarven hair binder. I noticed how you liked keeping that same hairstyle of yours, so I wanted to get you something to make that easier while also fitting your beauty. As Lucrute finished his explanation, I gave him a smile and then pulled my hair free of its binding before bunching it up and putting the binder against it before pressing the jewel once again. My ears heard the click of it snapping together and I shook my hair to get my hair to fall back into its normal state. How do I look? I asked. Absolutely beautiful. My love-struck archer answered with complete honesty. Thank you, I said before another matter came to my mind. Lucky, do you have any clothes that would be presentable in a high-class event of nobles? Lucrute gave me a disappointed look before he sighed and shook his head. I've never needed them, so why would I waste the money? Guess I'll be making you some, I stated. Wait, what? Why? He asked suspiciously. I, along with Momo and Nobe, were invited to a feast being hosted by E. Rantle's mayor, Panasolii. I'm allowed to bring a guest, so you are going to be my +1. Understood? I commanded in a tone that left no room for argument. Lucrute stiffened up and answered immediately, "Yes, ma'am." Then we both heard the others snickering before breaking out into forlorn laughter. "What's so funny?" Lucrute asked. "Oh, the wonders of love," Peter teased as he, Dine, and Nina all pulled out some bags of coins before tossing them over to the dismayed Archer. "What's the money for?" I asked. "I think that Lucrute should tell you. He's the one that agreed to the wager," Peter answered while I glanced over to Lucrute with a narrowed gaze as he began looking exceedingly guilty. "It's nothing, Kasha," Lucrute answered. "Oh, I think it is something. We'll have a lot of time to talk about it as I get you fitted for your new clothes," I stated while getting out of my seat and then dragging him out of his chair by the back of his collar towards the cabin. "All of you are traitors. I'll remember this," he shouted back to them, making the three burst out into further laughter. He can shout all he wants, I'll still get to the bottom of this bet that he made. Momonga/Eins all gown. It was worrying with how much of a slip-up I made with Kasha. I didn't realize that she hadn't told her friend Lucrute how she felt. It's hard enough to figure out women for me at the best of times, and Kasha was basically impossible to predict around. Especially with those hormonal issues she said she was having. While I know that she wouldn't hurt me with this payback she warned me of, humiliating me wasn't off the table. I'll probably need to try and let her cool off for a few days. Unfortunately, the small issue with trying to let her cool off is that Nabril, myself, and her would be going to that feast being held by the mayor tomorrow night. If it weren't for the fact that I'd be hurting my personas standing with the nobles of Rantel along with missing out on attempting to establish connections and increase the adventurer moments standing, I'd have cancelled my attendance. Now, I'd have to juggle keeping my human identity intact while also either avoiding or appeasing Kasha. "Momo, it's Kasha. You there?" Kasha asked with a message, which made me want to sigh in frustration. Maybe I could try to reason with her now? "Yes, Kasha. Do you need something?" I asked, wondering what she may have just done that could affect my persona. "I think I figured out a way to make up for what you did to me earlier today." I paused when she said that. Thank God, there might be a way to keep my dignity intact before she did something. Unless, what she wanted might be just as humiliating for me. "And how might I make up for what I did?" I asked with a bit of hesitation. "I plan on taking my team out training for a while. You wouldn't happen to have a necromancer or two lying around who I could borrow for a while, would you?" I could feel my non-existent eyebrows raise at what she was asking. I did have a few liches around that I could spare, but what did she need them for? "I'm not saying no, but why do you need to borrow some necromancers from me?" "For their training. I felt that having my team continually fight against monsters would help to increase their levels. Unfortunately, I'm not kitted out with that many mook-making spells, and those that I do have, there are some moral implications in having my friends kill them. But skeletons, zombies, and what have you. They are mindless and soulless. No moral dilemmas included. So, what do you think? This was the easiest deal I could ever agree to in my life or, well, unlife as it was now. I lent her the services of a few necromancers I could afford to lose and get the humiliating sword of Damocles removed from my head. I'd also get some test data on New World inhabitants' ability to grow. When do you need them? I'll give you the location tomorrow after I have finished making it. I'm planning on building out a replica dungeon for them from Yggdrasil. I just need to populate it with continuously spawning enemies. That was actually an interesting idea. While New World inhabitants were innately weaker than players and NPCs, I think it didn't help that this was a world that didn't follow the rules of programming that Yggdrasil did. If one went to a dungeon here and killed all the creatures, they wouldn't just respawn with all the loot of the dungeon. This world was finite that way. Damn, now she actually has me interested in seeing how far this could go. Kasha, what would you say if I threw in a few summoners as well? Ooh. Are you just being generous or is there something else that you have in mind? She teased, which made me feel a small amount of amusement. Actually, I have a few ideas. Lay them on me, calcium caster. And with that, the two of us spent the night devising all kinds of ideas for this dungeon that her adventuring team would be fighting through. To be honest, this was probably some of the most fun that I've had in a while. It reminded me of the days when my friends and I were first building up Nazarick from the simple dungeon it originally was to the powerhouse that it had become. Adding traps, figuring out where to position our NPCs, wondering where we should store our treasure. Now, I felt slightly giddy in seeing how these adventurers of hers would fare in this dungeon we were creating. Dungeons and Dinners is a far-out game. Lucrute. Day 15. Standing in front of the mayor's estate, I couldn't help but feel a little ridiculous waiting by the gates in this ludicrous get-up. After she took me inside the cabin yesterday, Kasha conjured up a set of clothes for me to try on for this event. By the end of it, I found myself in a white button shirt made of silk and tan trousers of an unidentifiable origin which were tucked into black leather boots. Tied to my neck was what Kasha called a cravat, something I had never heard of before, in a burgundy color that matched the waistcoat I was wearing. Over that was a crimson coat that ended to my knees in two tails while being edged in gold. I had even been forced to comb my hair for this event. This all just made me feel like a rooster being put on display. This feeling was reinforced because of the glances I kept receiving from passing nobles who didn't recognize me. Not that I could claim the same either. There were only a few nobles that I knew the names of, just because they were so prevalent, not that I'd be able to recognize them on sight. The mayor was one of those people and the direct royal family was another. Other than that, these people were just a flock of birds trying to show off their feathers to one another. Lucrute, correct? A deep voice that I recognized asked. I turned my head to the voice to find my gaze only reaching up to his chest, where I saw an adamantite plate resting. Craning my gaze upwards, I found myself meeting the gaze of a dark-haired man with black eyes and foreign features that I would assume came from the east. Momen? I asked in response, finding it quite surprising to see the elusive adventurer outside of his dark concealing armor. The man nodded, and I found myself noticing something that was just off about him. It was an innate feeling at the back of my mind, but it was hard to shake away. One of the physical things I could identify which wasn't just a simple feeling were his eyes. They seemed lifeless and dead, like black pits to an abyss that would swallow all light into them. It was unnerving to say the least. You are correct, Lucrute. Your question is quite understandable considering that you've never seen me without my armor before in addition to us only having met yesterday. Considering the dark suit he wore that was also of a foreign style, no one would ever recognize him from that plate mail of his. While it did have some similarities to the fashion styles here, it had too many differences to consider the clothes as anything but foreign. He wore a grey shirt that was buttoned up. At his neck was an odd folded collar where a strip of black fabric was tied around before the end of it went down his chest and fell under a purple waistcoat. He wore a pair of black pants which matched the short jacket he had on. What completed this outfit was a pair of unique leather shoes that looked odd in comparison to the other shoes that I had seen nobles wearing. With his height and fashion choices, Momen stood out like a sore thumb. Momen then motioned to the woman standing next to him, "This is my partner, Nobe." I remembered her, though she definitely looked a lot different when out of her adventuring attire. She wore a ball gown of grey velvet that was both conservative and seemed to fit her regal appearance and demeanor more than the adventuring attire did. Though, her glances of annoyance at the nobles looking at her with interest seemed to muddle that regalness. Alongside that was the adamantite plate which proved that she was more than just a pretty face. She at least managed to fit the aesthetic of the nobles entering the manor unlike her larger partner. "It's good to meet you both again. You didn't stay long before you both suddenly left the guild," I remarked. It was fairly obvious that Momen and Nobe had rushed off due to that warning from Kasha. "Yes, well, Nobe and I had a few matters that needed to be attended to," Momen answered quickly, and I found it unsettling how his face showed absolutely no emotion that his voice seemed to convey. He then decided to change the subject. "Since you're here, I can assume that you're the guest Kasha brought with her. Where is she right now since I couldn't find her anywhere else?" Your guess is as good as mine. I've been waiting here for a while now. Been receiving all the fun attention of nobles looking at me like a dog performing a new trick. I muttered with some hard-to-contain frustration at the end. I see. Momen hummed in contemplation. It's obvious that you are uncomfortable here. It's a feeling that is mutual. The Black Knight answered while scanning the crowd around us. At least I'm not the only one that feels that way. I replied with a lightened mood. Then, I became slightly surprised when Nobe spoke, since she seemed like a quiet person and less addressed. I wish for this event to conclude swiftly. Receiving these glances of obvious intent from these nobles makes my skin crawl, Nobe stated with a frown. It shouldn't last too long. Momen was interrupted when the familiar voice of Kasha spoke up behind him. Seems that the gang is all here. The three of us then looked behind Momen to find Kasha approaching us looking completely different from what I was expecting. Instead of black, she was wearing a dress that looked like it was made from gold. While slightly more conservative from her usual outfit due to having flowing sleeves and a skirt that was connected, there were some obvious parts to it that went against conservative fashion. For instance, her skirt had a scandalous slit up the right side that allowed her bare leg through. Her cleavage was on full display and the collar of her dress was open. What really ended up drawing my gaze were the two items around her neck. One of them was her adamantite plate, but the other was an object I hadn't seen her wearing before. Attached to a choker around her neck was a spherical jewel that almost seemed to glow in the dim light. I felt a strange pull to it that I couldn't explain while my chest seemed to warm up. It was almost mesmerizing, but I managed to pull my gaze away from it to look at Kasha's face. I was greeted by a warm smile that I returned. Sorry to keep you waiting. Tara wouldn't stop fussing about my appearance. Namely, the hair, she said while pointing her hair that had been put into a braided bun. It's fine, Kasha. I didn't have to wait long and these two just got here. I answered, happy that someone I knew was here in this sea of snobs. Someone that I had managed to actually kiss. I don't even know what had pushed me to finally take the initiative to do that. The bet I had made with the others was definitely not part of it, since that hadn't even been on my mind at the time. But she kissed me back. She felt the same way I did, which made me feel like I could jump over the moon in joy. And that also made me feel that much more determined to fulfill my promise to her. Shall we get this excessive waste of food and money over with? She asked with her usual sarcasm. Yes. I don't particularly enjoy the idea of being forced to interact with these people to try and establish connections, but it is a necessity we must endure. Momen answered, which made me finally notice something else that unsettled me. His blinking. At the span of every 8 seconds, he would blink. It almost felt less like he was blinking because it was a natural bodily function and more because it's what a normal human was expected to do. I doubt most of these nobles would notice something like this when speaking with Momen, but my background as a hunter and archer let me notice these small details that grew more concerning as time went on. Then let's get going, Kasha announced, taking me out of my observations of Momen. I held out my arm to her and Kasha linked her arm into the crook of mine. Then the four of us began walking through the gates. Glancing around, this was the first time I've ever even seen the mayor's estate. There were statues on pedestals to either side of the walkway depicting dragons, warriors in mid-swing of their blades, archers with their bows drawn, mages casting spells. I'd find it interesting to stop and look at if it wouldn't single me out as a normal peasant to the nobles around us who didn't spare these statues a glance. When we made it to the door, a pair of armored knights wielding halberds glanced at us. Well, more so that they glanced at the adamantite plates hanging from the necks of Kasha, Momen, and Nobe. Then their eyes focused on Kasha's cleavage, which filled me with a pang of annoyance. They didn't even pay me a moment's attention. Then again, it's hard to compare oneself to adamantite plates when you are just a silver plate. Also, they continued ogling Kasha as we were let through the door. That left me a little miffed. Once we were past the door, It opened into a great hall where nobles were mingling with one another and being served food from trays that servants would bring up to them. The silver trays that were carrying all this food were worth a fortune. The fact that there were dozens of these servants carrying these silver trays really proved to me how different the value of things was between peasants like myself and all of these nobles. Kasha was likely used to displays like this, considering that she is the noble daughter of the ruler of a country. Come to think of it, since she never said that her country was a vassal of another. Am I romantically involved with a princess? Looking at Kasha dressed in gold and giving no care to the wealth around her, I could easily picture her with a crown on her head. I didn't have long to continue this pondering as a man in a purple outfit filled with more frills than scents appeared before us. I think he was even wearing a wig. Ah, splendid. You must be the new adamantite-plate adventurers that slew the dreaded vampire. As he said this, his green eyes moved from Momen, with a hint of disinterest, to Kasha and Nobe, who he became a lot more fascinated by. And aside from strength, it seems that tales of your beauty are true as well. Thank you for the compliment, good sir. Kasha replied with that hint of sarcasm that I could hear and did my best to not smirk at. But we are at a loss. Who might you be? I am Lord Ironicus Rochard von Dalton III. My family breeds many of the horses used in Re-Estize's cavalry units. In addition, we breed the very horses that the royal family rides upon. The purple pompous lord bragged. Would you fair ladies be kind enough to give me your names in return? Certainly, I'm Kasha Blanc. Kasha answered. I noticed as Momen nudged Nobe in the side. I'm Nobe. Nobe begrudgingly answered while looking like she wanted to be anywhere else but near him. This made the purple fop look a bit put off before he refocused his attention back onto Kasha. I felt a growing urge to hit him. Those are certainly quite exotic names. And with your beautiful appearances and unique clothing of expensive make, you seem less like adventurers and more like nobility. Nobe scoffed at this compliment. I would never dare claim to be of nobility. My station is to serve Momen. I am. Kasha answered, eliciting a warm smile from irony, whatever that didn't match the sinister and cunning gaze in the man's eyes. At the same time, I noticed Momen's head swivel to Kasha, yet I couldn't tell what, if any, emotions or thoughts might be going through his mind. I knew that a maiden of your class and grace wouldn't be anything less. From what land do you hail from? I'm not familiar with any noble family of the name Blanc. The purple jester pried deeper. That is because my home is far away. Beyond all the known countries to the east. Then even further beyond that. It is a land called Yggdrasil. She answered. Momen also hails from Yggdrasil with a noble lineage himself. The purple fop looked at Momen in a new light. I couldn't blame him since it was a surprise for me as well. Really? What house do you come from, good sir? My house doesn't matter as they are all dead. My family and land were destroyed by the vampire we hunted and killed. Now, I'm just a simple adventurer. Momen answered, noticing the now uninterested gaze the noble gave him. I believe that I shall take a walk around. I'd like to clear my mind of such events. He then gave a nod to the two of us before walking away. Nobe gave a small bow to us as well before following after Momen. I could only guess that his reason for leaving the conversation was due to him realizing he'd get nowhere with this prick. Kasha, Momen, and Nobe were here to build connections after all. And trying to get blood from a stone that was this noble would be a waste of effort that could be better spent elsewhere. I just wished that Kasha had a reason to leave the conversation with this guy because he was getting on my nerves. What a dour man. Though, considering the circumstances, it is understandable to be upset about losing one's family lands and wealth. Really, that's his first thought. No sympathy that his family is dead, just that he isn't as rich as he used to be. I could feel my hands beginning to curl into fists as I really wanted to punch this man. Apparently, Kasha noticed this as I felt the pressure of her arm gently squeeze, making me let go of the fist I was making. On to other topics. What about your family? My mother rules our country. Aside from her, I had a few sisters. She answered. Oh, and what about your father? He's dead. The purple prick gave her a look of sympathy, but I knew better than that. Those cunning eyes of his were continuing to look at her with a growing glint of greed. So, your mother rules your country alone. Very interesting. I've only heard of matrilineal rule from the Roble Holy Kingdom with their current first female monarch. But, your country practices it as well, which is quite intriguing. Is your country vassalized under another? No one would be stupid or insane enough to try. Kasha answered, making me smirk at how strong I knew just she was. I couldn't even fathom how powerful her mother might be to maintain control of her kingdom with all the wars that Kasha said occurred there. My mother rules as the sole queen. Then, I really was romantically involved with the princess of an entire kingdom. To be honest, Kasha didn't exactly act like what I expected royalty to be. She certainly had the beauty and grace for it, but she could also be crass, vulgar, and quite the practical joker. And I don't think that I'd have it any other way. Then that would make you a princess. Actual royalty. The prick then gave a deep bow. It is quite the honor to meet a foreign dignitary such as yourself. I'm highly interested in knowing what brings a princess to our kingdom when it is so far away. Normally, royal families are kept close to home in case unforeseen circumstances were to occur. Especially so for heirs. I'm a bit of what you'd call a free spirit. I didn't have any plan when coming here, just a wanderlust and enjoyment of adventure. As for being allowed to travel, my mother is quite hands-off as it were with her children. This is aided by the fact that she has no plans to vacate her throne anytime soon, since my family is aided by an extraordinarily long lifespan. A long lifespan? How long did her family members typically live for? I see. Still, if the worst were to occur, your mother's heirs should be nearby as a precaution. Would you happen to be lower on the line of succession that would allow you to travel so freely? I really wanted to punch this man in the face since I could see the obvious gears in his head turning at this. He was looking at Kasha like a piece of meat with a crown attached to it. Now, he was just wondering on how to acquire that crown. As her only remaining child, I would be next in line for the throne. Kasha answered with a slightly mournful tone. You have my condolences, Your Highness. I know the tragedy of losing my 4 older brothers to tragic illnesses and accidents. It also left me as my family's heir due to being next in line. He replied with a sad expression that I could tell was good acting. I was becoming pissed that this prick couldn't muster any form of compassion for just 1 minute. Yet, that just means that I must become more diligent in fulfilling my duties to my family. After all, ensuring the bloodline is something that heirs like us must complete at all costs. Of course, Kasha said with a strained smile. At least she was getting as annoyed with this guy as I already am. That seemed to be the signal to the purple prick to make a move. I have typically received quite a few proposals to unite my family's line with another, yet I haven't found the correct one to accept. What of you? Surely, as the sole surviving princess of your homeland, Yggdrasil, you would receive many different proposals from suitors over the years. Now that he asked it, I couldn't help but wonder that myself. As an extremely beautiful princess with great magical power and next in line to a throne, she likely would receive suitors from a massive amount of people, both within her kingdom and outside of it. Many from suitors who were probably stronger and more capable than I am right now. I'm not engaged to anyone, nor have I received any proposals. She then smirked. It would be a little difficult to send said proposals when I'm away from my home, after all. That certainly is true. But have you ever considered making ties to foreign kingdoms? For instance, as a noble and heir with quite high standings, I have quite the sway in Re-Estize's politics. This little fuck. Unfortunately, while your offer is kind and quite generous, and while I'm not engaged, I'm currently seeing Lucrute right now. She then leaned her head onto my shoulder, drawing the asshole's attention onto me. Oh, and who might you be? Forgive me, but I've never seen you before and believed that you might be Princess Kasha's manservant. My eyes narrowed as I knew an insult when I heard it. My name's Lucrute Volve. I'm part of an adventuring team with Kasha. I told him, doing the best to hide my anger. I don't recall hearing of your family's name from anywhere. He pondered with a sly look. That's because you wouldn't. My family are peasants, I stated. That caused him to become shocked as he looked between myself and Kasha with some, very satisfying I might add, confusion. Princess Kasha, while I don't mean to insinuate anything of your character and status, why are you in such a relationship with a peasant? It is most unbecoming. Purple Prick asked while frowning. He makes me laugh. She answered dryly. But the peasant is beneath you. He provides nothing for you but a means to sully your honor. Like rats, peasants try to steal and consume from their betters. I finally had enough of him insulting not only me, but also Kasha. You know, it's funny how you describe rats, I interrupted. After all, you certainly seem to be acting like one ever since you learned of Kasha's status. Purple Prick looked like he'd been slapped once I said this. I enjoyed the few seconds of peace from hearing him speak before he finally processed everything. Then his face began turning red. How dare you declare such a slanderous insult against your betters, you lowly wretch. Words such as that against nobility can earn oneself time in a jail or death, he threatened, making me feel more certain that I wanted to make him swallow his teeth. It's only slander if it were a lie. You insignificant bass. Please, Lord Dalton. Kasha interrupted as she got in between me and the arrogant little shit. Let's not have you and Lucrute get into a petty disagreement at such a wonderful party. Right now is a time to celebrate and enjoy ourselves. I'm sure you can find it in your generous heart to look past this. Don't you think so, Lord Dalton? I could tell that the guy was getting pretty flustered at her putting some charm into her request. Oh, of course, Princess Kasha. It wouldn't do for those of our stature to be brought down to such base reactions in front of our lessers. He then bowed before taking her hand and kissing it. Please, enjoy the party, and I hope that we can eventually meet again in a different venue. Of course, Lord Dalton. I wish you the same as well. Kasha answered with a plastered smile. Then, Dalton focused on me. Enjoy the party, since I doubt that you've ever experienced much like it before, Lucrute Volve. With that, he walked off into the crowd towards another group of guests. Kasha then turned towards me with a raised brow. I hope you don't plan on making enemies with too many people tonight. I doubt I can diffuse every situation as easily as that one. She remarked with a genuine smirk. I know. It's just that he managed to really get under my skin. I didn't like how he was taking about you. I answered with a sigh. I felt her hand cupping my cheek and felt my gaze drawn to her orange eyes. You are not alone in that regard. That man was repulsive. I had half a mind to teleport him into a lake and leave him there. Kasha remarked with a disappointed sigh. Sadly, that wouldn't exactly make for a good reputation and would create more issues compared to the relief I'd feel. The pair of us got a small laugh from that. Then, Kasha went back to my side and hooked her arm into mine before leading forwards. So, a princess, huh? Should I start referring to you as Princess Kasha as well? I asked with a teasing grin. Would you like to be teleported into a lake? She warned in response. But if you did that, then you'd have to deal with all of these nobles by yourself. I retorted, making the blonde princess think about it before rolling her eyes with a sigh. It appears that you are right. Guess I'll have to save dropping you into a lake for a future date. Realizing that this would be one of the few times I could do this without immediate retaliation, I leaned down and whispered into her ear, I'll keep that in mind for the future, my beautiful Princess Kasha. I finished with as much huskiness as I could conjure into my voice. That seemed to get the reaction I wanted since I felt her shiver for a moment before red dusted her cheeks. Then, her eyes flashed gold before changing back to their normal orange. Was that some sort of magic? I didn't get long to think about it because she then pulled my arm closer to her chest, enough to feel the soft pressure of her generous bust squish into the side of my arm. This was followed by her hip bumping into my side as she got slightly closer to me. Don't start teasing me now, she said as a warning, but I could also hear a bit of needy desperation in her tone. I feel that leaving her a little hot and bothered was perfect payback for how she teased me yesterday. I could never try to tease you, my beautiful Princess Tilda, I whispered into her ear and felt another shiver, followed by her stepping a heel into my boot. The pain my foot was feeling was definitely worth the reaction, especially because she now had trapped my arm into a death grip against her breast. This is par payback for yesterday, isn't it? Kasia asked as she began trying to calm herself down. The cute pout on her reddened face made it even better. What would ever give you that idea? I answered as nonchalantly as possible. I really hate you right now. I couldn't help but chuckle at that. At least this feast gave me the chance to taunt Kasia without retaliation. Following that, multiple nobles would come up to us throughout the hour that we spent socializing. Apparently, the purple prick, Dalton, had already been spreading word to the other nobles that one of the newest adamantite-plate adventurers was actually the princess of a foreign land. That caused no end of headaches as multiple men kept trying to court her or offer marriage proposals that Kasia had to turn down. I did my best to try and remain quiet while offering my support to her, not that Kasia exactly needed it. No, she seemed to constantly manage to wrap these nobles around her finger, a task made easy due to her appearance. She wasn't the only one finding success since Momen and Nobbe, well, more Momen than anything, were making good headway with their interactions. I think that Momen's mysterious presence, combined with his serious expression, enamored more than a few noble ladies. At the same time, Nobbe's beauty and regal air managed to pull in the men. What did make the whole process a little humorous was how Momen constantly had to speak for Nobbe since she showed no patience or urge to deal with those interested in her. Aside from those two, I also spent my time listening in on other conversations that the nobles were having. It was quite interesting to hear their thoughts, opinions, and knowledge on matters related to the kingdom. For one, the crown princes were fighting among each other to become the next king. Some thought that if an heir was not declared soon, then the possibility of a civil war could be on the horizon. Another conversation involved talk of a massive fire in the capital that caused the deaths of many different nobles at a brothel, yet, oddly, it didn't manage to spread anywhere else. No survivors had been discovered, which was causing issues for a few houses whose house heads and heirs had been among those discovered dead. Along with that, there was a lot of talk about this year's harvest having shrunk due to a lack of farmers who had been conscripted for the army. The fact that the army was also consuming the country's food stores while less could be put in meant that the prices of food would end up being raised soon, along with starvation becoming an issue. That news was immensely concerning. And then, I heard some of the most interesting news of all. From what I've heard, a goddess was found in the great forest of Tob living on the lake in a palace of gold. A noble in blue stated, "Really? That sounds absolutely absurd. What goddess would ever decide to live in that barbaric place for starters? And a golden palace, too? Obviously, it's some fanciful tale that the peasants have been spreading. It's likely some hermit witch that casted a few spells to scare some gullible fools." A fat noble in green responded with a laugh. "There may be some truth to such a story." A noble woman in red interjected, "My husband has had quite a few dealings with the Magicians' Guild in the past few days. Aside from them acting odder than usual for such people that practice those strange arts, they also had an expedition sent out to the forest that apparently came back with something of great importance." "I can confirm that." A thin noble in a wig added, "Quite a few of those mages spoke of a woman of inhuman beauty that they called the Fox Princess. She could apparently conjure up spells beyond the abilities of mortals, such as a giant tree of stone. Apparently, she even blessed some of their own with knowledge on controlling time of all things. And I think that the mages have gone cracked." "A fox princesses? What does she do? Conjure animals that I spend my time hunting with my hounds?" The fat noble joked. "Well, I think part of her name comes from the fact that she has the traits of foxes on her body. Long animal ears and 9 golden tails. They were really quite descriptive." So, a witch with a beautiful body and some strange animal appendages managed to beguile some scholars who have been lacking in the company of women. This witch is obviously a fraud. I won't be surprised when the Church of the Four Great Gods decides to send an inquisition upon her. But who knows, maybe I could send a few of my hounds to hunt her down myself, see what the fuss is all about. That got a laugh from the group of nobles while I could only ponder their words. Kasha had been part of that expedition but hadn't really said much about it. Maybe her group really did encounter a goddess? She had dealt with gods before from what she had said to us. And from what I saw of that spell she cast from miles away, I could only imagine what this goddess could do. Though, the fact that this fox princess was beautiful could only make me shrug in response. I had Kasha, and she was more beautiful to me than any random goddess could be. But still, if powerful monsters that could give Kasha trouble and deities were appearing, I needed to get stronger quickly. I had to be able to protect everyone. That seed I was given would be the key to doing that. I just needed to figure out how it worked. I was taken out of my thoughts when the voice of a servant echoed through the hall, "Esteemed guests of Lord Rettenmeyer, would you kindly make your way to the banquet hall where your seats have been prepared?" The nobles quickly began clearing the room to head for the banquet hall. Kasha looked at me with an excited twinkle in her eyes. At least we'll finally be able to get the free food and drink that was promised. You ready? Yes. I don't know about you, but I want this feast to be over as soon as possible. These people irritate me with how superior and haughty they act. I remarked before adding, it also doesn't help that I've had to listen to God knows how many propositions of marriage to you. Not a walk in the park for me, either. Most of the men giving me said proposals can't even be bothered to maintain eye contact with me. Kasha complained with a huff, that is in addition to the people who wanted to recruit me for their private armies. Either I'm someone they want to fuck or a weapon to be pointed at their enemies. Hopefully, Momo and Nobe had better luck than me. We then started making our way out of the room and went up a grand staircase as we followed the other guests. From what I saw, I don't think your friends Momon and Nobe had many issue establishing connections. Though, they didn't receive nearly as much attention as you did. Bet the two were thankful for that. Kasha took a glance over to the aforementioned pair that looked at ease in the current moment. Bet they were indeed. Kasha remarked with a giggle. Did she know something that I didn't? It wasn't much longer before we finally arrived into the banquet hall. What I saw inside, there were two tables parallel with one another that spanned most of the banquet hall's length that were draped in purple cloth. Up at the front of these two vertical tables was a third table that was horizontal to them. I could already see what I assumed was the mayor at that table with a few friends or family to either side of him. All of the tables were loaded with plates of food and that I've seen people kill for even a tenth of. From there, us guests were led by servants to designated seating spots. Kasha and I had been sat together at one table while Momon and Nobe had been sat at the other. Interestingly enough, the four of us had been put in chairs closest to the mayor's table. My guess for this is that the mayor wanted to spread out the adamantite-plate adventurers between the two tables to show off. I just happened to be the extra tag-along. What really sucked about this seating arrangement is that while Momon and Nobe were put across from a kindly-looking elderly couple, Kasha and I had been put across from. "Ah, Lord Dalton," Kasha said with a forced smile as we were seated, "this is such an interesting coincidence to be sitting across from you." "It is such a delight to be sitting across from your radiant beauty, Princess Kasha," the purple prick said with a grin. I knew he had to have something to do with this seating arrangement. The purple prick was soon joined by a man in a red outfit similar in frills to him. Unlike Dalton, he wasn't wearing a wig. Instead, he had a moustache that curled upwards on his face and looked to have been covered in grease to accomplish said feat. "Princess Kasha, let me introduce you to my cousin, Count Azelt Bernard von Dalton II. He is known for owning multiple establishments throughout the country." As the purple prick introduced this count, I couldn't help but notice how the count looked at Kasha with utter lust, like she was a piece of meat. "It is an amazing pleasure to one of your stature, Princess Kasha. When my cousin told me that we had a princess attending this event, I was amazing, especially when hearing that you were one of the 3 adventurers that ended up defeating the vampire threatening Rantel. Most impressive. He complimented while his eyes wandered all over her body. Thank you for the praise, Count Ezelk. It was a tough fight, but Momen, Nobe, and I eventually defeated Bathory together. Kasha replied while taking a sip from her goblet of wine. I did the same, if only so that the eventual buzz from the alcohol would make listening to the Daltons that much more tolerable. I hear that you the journey here from your homeland, Yggdrasil, all by yourself. Is that correct? Ezelk asked while cutting off a piece of boar and slipping it into his mouth. It's pronounced Yggdrasil. But yes, I did make the journey here by my lonesome. Quite astounding. Did you not fear the possibility of encountering monsters, bandits, or slavers while traveling? Any journey has risks, Count Ezelk. If I had to stop my journey because of every little danger encountered, then I'd have never left my home. Kasha replied with a smirk as she took a bite of boar meat. Taking another sip of my goblet, I dug into the food on my plate. A wise mentality, Princess Kasha. Ezelk acknowledged while giving the purple prick a knowing glance from the corner of his eye, then he focused on Kasha once more. So, this land of Yggdrasil, your mother rules all of it? Yggdrasil is divided into 9 different realms. All these realms have different rulers of them. While there are constant wars between the multiple kingdoms of each realm, my mother rules a territory between the realms of Vanaheim and Midgard known as the Realm of Foxes. Kasha answered, her tone becoming more regal as she spoke more of her home. Isn't that just interesting? I would assume that the name is due to a large number of the creatures residing within your land, correct? He asked while I started thinking about the name of Kasha's homeland. Earlier, a few nobles spoke of some goddess that had appeared in Tob that was known as the Fox Princess. Could she somehow be related to Kasha? Perhaps a deity from her homeland? But then, why would that deity be here, unless she followed Kasha? That would be correct, Count Ezelk. Kasha answered with some mirth, foxes are considered to be quite sacred in my country. Really? At least in Riastais, foxes are typically hunted for being pests to farmers or for the sport they provide during hunts. It is quite unique for another country to see these animals as beings of worship, Ezelk said with some actual interest that I shared. Kasha hadn't really spoken much of her home, so I was quite enraptured when she actually did speak of it. You have to understand that our land is protected by a guardian goddess who is considered the queen of foxes. She both aided the mortals of the land with bountiful harvests, industry, fertility, prosperity, and magic. Her emissaries are foxes that are blessed with both magic and intelligence. Another unique trait of these foxes is their ability to grow multiple tails. So, it is quite reasonable to see why foxes are so revered in my homeland. Well, it seems, at least, that you are living proof of this goddess' blessings. You are quite blessed as the epitome of fertile beauty while also being a powerful enough sorceress to have become an adamantite plate adventurer. Any person would be blessed to have a woman like you. Kasha covered her lower face with her sleeve, as if she was shy of such compliments. Yet, knowing her long enough, along with having a better view of her from the side, I could see that she was anything but bashful of such compliments. Her eyes remained playful to the cousins, but her mouth, hidden behind her sleeve, showed absolute disgust. Please, Count Ezelk, you're making me blush, she said shyly with gritted teeth. Then, her mouth turned back into that plastered smile and she lowered her sleeve from her face. It is the truth, Princess Kasha. In fact, if you were willing, I'd love for you to come by my manor hear more about your homeland along with stories of your travels. They sound so fascinating that I doubt this feast will last long enough to hear them all. I plan to remain in Rantel for a few weeks to make a few business deals, but I have multiple days free that you could come by for tea to continue discussions. The Count offered. That would be lovely, Count Ezelk. I always enjoy when people have curious minds eager to learn new things. Kasha replied in a bubbly tone. I don't know why, but something just bothered me about the man. Aside from his lustful looks at Kasha, Ezelk just gave me this feeling that made me want to get away from him. I know Kasha probably felt the same way, and that made me all the more confused on why she was so enthusiastic about meeting with this count, most likely alone. What was she planning? I drained my goblet with this question and grabbed the silver pitcher in front of me that I used to refill the cup. Then I immediately drained half the cup. Splendid. If you are able, would you be willing to come by my manor in 3 days at noon? The repulsive count asked with a sinister glint in his eyes and a growing, toothy grin. Certainly. I just love being able to visit new places, Kasha said with an excited tone. With that, I had to continue listening to the odious cousins continue to fire questions at my sorceress while she answered with that fake enthusiasm that felt painful for me to hear since it just felt wrong. They also spent quite a bit of time bragging about their families and wealth. As I continued to eat, I ended up draining my cup a few more times until I was feeling warm and my thoughts felt clouded. Yet, that didn't change the fact that listening to all of these nobles talk of immense wealth, their great families, successions, and more that just went on and on made me feel like an outsider. I wasn't like these people, and I never would be. Put a bow in my hands, and I could give a person a whole wealth of knowledge on usage, hunting, the best spot to hit a target, how to lead a shot, and more. But this? It made me feel like the loneliest person in the world, and it felt choking. I needed air. Pushing myself out of my seat, and nearly stumbling, I leaned over to Kasha's ear and whispered, "I need to move my legs for a bit." Her orange eyes met mine with some concern. "Are you all right?" she whispered back. "Why, yeah. Just continue enjoying the feast. I just have to get some air," I replied with a reassuring smile. She didn't look fully convinced, but she nodded in acceptance. From the corner of my eye, I saw the odious cousins sharing satisfied smirks as I walked away. I did my best to keep myself steady, but I may have made a small stumble before I finally exited the banquet hall. I found a servant standing at attention by the banquet hall's entrance, so I went over to him. He gazed at me with a look of concern before asking, "My lord, is there something that I can do for you? Is there a place to get some fresh air? It's a little stuffy in there and I needed to catch my breath." "If you head down the hall, the door to the terrace will be the first on the right," the servant answered, and I gave him a nod of appreciation. "Thanks," I said before stumbling my way off towards the directed area. It took a minute, and I almost tripped over my feet, but eventually, I opened the door to reveal the terrace under the starry night sky. As I stumbled to the railing, I was able to get an amazing view of the city ahead. The lights coming from each building off in the distance gave it a feeling of life that you couldn't find during the daytime. Out here, everything seemed so much simpler. No nobles talking about inane bullshit, no thoughts of what the future may hold, no worries. Just the cool night air and a simple view of the city. I spent some time like this, enjoying the feeling while also working through the fog on my mind. I closed my eyes and just focused on breathing. "Copper for your thoughts?" Then, I felt a warmth at my side before I opened my eyes to see Kasha resting on the railing next to me. "What brought you out here? You should be in banquet hall continuing to make connections. That is what you are here for, after all," I questioned as those jewels of orange gazed into the distance. The lights of city reflected off her eyes, making them glow like setting suns. Then, she turned those jewels to me and smiled warmly. It made me happy to see her with a genuine smile instead of the plastered expression she had been using for much of the night. I think I've made enough connections for one day. Besides, I can only take so much of people trying to kiss my marvelous ass before I get sick of it. It was only bearable because I had someone else with me to share in the suffering," she answered while playfully bumping her body into mine. I chuckled at her response. "Wow, you only brought me here to suffer? I can really feel the love from you right now," I teased back. "Well, I guess I did also bring you here so that I could have an enjoyable time with someone I knew," she admitted with a giggle. "Then, if you had to rate it, how enjoyable would you say your night has been?" I curiously asked with a raised brow. Kasha put a finger on her chin in thought as she pondered the question, then she answered, "On a scale of 1 to 10 for dates, I'd give it a 4. The food was worth 2 points." "What were the other 2 points for?" I think I'll keep that to myself. Her face was filled with amused mirth when she said this, which made me quite curious. But then, I thought of a better idea, since she probably wouldn't answer if I asked. Putting my hand under her chin to lift her face up, I leaned down and met her lips with mine. I watched her orange eyes widen in surprise before changing to amusement and then finally closing as she leaned into my kiss with a satisfied hum. We were like this for a while before finally separating as we caught our breaths. I rested my forehead against hers and watched her eyes open with satisfaction. How many points would you say that was worth? I'll give it 3. Congrats, your total is at a 7 right now. You're getting a passing grade. Kasha answered with a cute smile. If I'm getting a passing grade for satisfying a princess, I think that I'm doing pretty well. I remarked. I think I'll have to bring the score down to a 6 for that. Maybe a 6.5 if I'm feeling generous. She responded before I kissed her again, earning a muffled giggle before separating once again. We'll leave it at a 7, just because I enjoy your boldness. I always aim to please my beautiful princess, I whispered back. She responded by hooking her arm into mine and resting her head into my shoulder while looking out onto the city. Don't push it, dummy. Kasha playfully warned as we remained in that position for a while after. Nina. Day 16. Walking east of Rantel, none of us knew where Kasha was leading us to. We had met at the Adventurers Guild, and then Kasha had us all marching out of the city without even taking a job. Instead, she just told us that jobs would only be a waste of time. None of us had been able to get any information from Kasha when we asked her where she was leading us. Not even Lucrute or myself could pry any word from her. It was actually quite impressive how she kept silent since we tried everything in our combined arsenal to get her to talk. We gave up after realizing that we were more likely to get answers from a corpse than from her. Still, speaking of Lucrute and Kasha, it seemed that the pair had a good time at the feast. Tara and I were able to get a good view of this when she had returned home last night with a bit of a cheer in her step. Tara had asked her what had happened, and I eagerly listened because I liked knowing that my teacher was being made happy. And since I knew it was Lucrute she was seeing, then I wasn't worried about him upsetting her. From what Kasha had told us, the evening had gone relatively well with Lucrute, at least. The only main issues that occurred were lusting nobles and unending offers of joining as a household mage or marriage. Tara and I were quite confused at why so many nobles would be giving her marriage offers until she dropped a fireball onto the conversation. Cash as a princess. Well, technically, I already suspected that considering that her mother is an actual goddess. If that wasn't considered royalty, then I don't know what is. Still, the fact that she admitted it was interesting, especially because Tara didn't exactly know how to react. Thankfully, Kasha has always been pretty humble about her status. The most she ever brags about is her appearance or magical power, both of which were well deserved. She just wanted Tara and I to treat her the same as we always have. From there, she had mentioned how she and Lucrute had spent some time alone watching the city together. The fact that she blushed when talking about it confirmed that she and Lucrute did a little something more than just watch the city. After enough needling, Tara managed to coax out that Kasha and Lucrute had kissed some more, which made Tara squeal in delight at the romantic activity. I highly enjoyed that it was Kasha being made uncomfortable and embarrassed for once instead of me. Still, all of that led to right now, where we had begun our journey at the start of the morning and it was now some time past noon. When asked why she didn't just teleport us, we were told that our journey to the end destination was stamina training. If this was stamina training, I feel that Kasha was going easy on us. All right, everyone. We've made it, Kasha announced as she stopped walking. The rest of us followed suit before looking past her to a small hill with an entrance blocked by a stone door in front of it. On either side of the door were sconces holding torches of blue fire that illuminated it in an eerie azure light. Foxfire, where are we? Peter asked as he looked at the stone entrance cautiously. Kasha turned around and looked at us with an ominous grin. The fact that my mind identified the blue flame let me know that it was somehow related to Kasha in one way or another. We're at a relatively new dungeon that has appeared in this land. It's filled with more than enough challenges to force all of you to grow stronger. Kasha answered. How did you even find out about this dungeon if it's so new? Dine spoke up. The fact that the fire was related to Kasha possibly meant that something divine may have informed her of it. That, or some other method that I was unaware of. To answer that, I'll only say with magic, Kasha said with a laugh, making us all groan at how much of a non-answer it was. Now, before I send you into this place, we'll be going over exactly what you'll be expecting once you go inside, so gather around. The four of us quickly dropped our traveling packs and got closer to my teacher before she finally spoke again. I already know everything that is inside of this dungeon. What you four need to know is that there are 3 levels to this dungeon that get harder the further you go down. While I might not be going with you, I will make certain that none of you end up dying during your dungeon delving. What about enemies in this dungeon? Lucrute asked. The first floor is filled with undead. When you manage to conquer that floor, I'll let you know what is on the second. Undead. I had 3 reliable spells that could work against undead. Firebolt, Flame Wave, and Force Blast. All 3 capitalized on undead weaknesses which would certainly be useful. How will you make sure that we don't end up dying? I couldn't help but ask. Kasha just gave me a smirk in response. You'll have to find out if it comes to that. Just know that I won't allow any of you to die. Should we expect anything on this first level besides undead? From what I know about dungeon exploration from others, there can also be things such as traps, treasures, and even greater monsters that can rule a dungeon. Peter questioned while pulling out a few potions from his traveling pack and equipping them into pouches on his belt. The rest of us copied his action and started unpacking tools for the dungeon. Possibly. You should always expect that there may be something else within a dungeon that even prior intel doesn't cover. This is just one of those moments, she said with a serious tone, making us all pay attention at the tip. None of us had actually performed dungeon delving before, namely because of how dangerous such a job could become. At a bare minimum, most dungeons were explored by gold-plated adventurers and above. Additionally, it took a certain kind of confidence to march into a dungeon without any knowledge on what may reside inside. It was a high-risk, high-reward job that might not even provide a proper reward after defeating all the enemies of the dungeon. All of us had heard tales of adventuring teams coming back home with only a single survivor. The only thing of value that was found consisted of a single item worth a silver or 2. Even with Kasha's reassurances and knowledge of what this dungeon held, I still couldn't help but feel worried about what we may encounter. If we enter this dungeon, will we be able to exit it? I've heard about dungeons with entrances that would shut behind anyone who entered, with the only exit being located further within. Lucrute remarked as he glanced at the stone door. You'll all be able to leave at any time, lucky. Kasha answered with some mirth. That doesn't mean that it will be easy. Then, my teacher motioned over to the entrance and finished with, now, your dungeon awaits you to conquer it. Be alert, keep your wits about you, never split the party, and kick some ass. She then conjured a strange white chair on the spot and sat in it. Following this, she waved her hand and conjured a magic circle that enchanted all of us. It felt exactly like the spell, Mana Font, that she had used on us when we fought those goblins and ogres at the farm. At least I was reassured that I wouldn't be running out of mana anytime soon. We all finalized equipping any of the items that we had brought with us in our packs. I had made sure to bring a few extra torches, flint and tinder, some rations and drink, 5 healing potions, and a few rolls of bandages. I now felt as prepared as I could be. Once the others had finished, we all began marching towards the stone door, which allowed us to get a better view of the design that was carved on the front of the door. A stylized tree with 9 branches shooting off into different directions was the main design of the door. At the top of this tree, runes of an unknown language said something, either in explanation of this place or as a warning. Anyone have an idea on what these runes mean? Peter wondered as his hand traced the runes carved into the door. "I've never seen a language like this. It is interesting," Dine replied as his eyes repeatedly examined the words in hopes of recalling something. I noticed that Lucrute's eyes seemed more fixed on the image of the tree, like some kind of vague recognition. "I don't know either," I admitted. "What about you, Lucrute?" That seemed to bring the blonde archer out of his fixation on the door, and made him look at me with a shrug. I'm not sure. Something about the tree on the door just looks familiar to me. But it's like trying to recall something from a dream," he answered, making the others look at him with sympathy. "Well, don't become that fixated on it. Maybe the recollection will come to you in time," Peter said to reassure our friend. Lucrute seemed to perk up at this and gave a nod in response. With that, Peter began pushing the door, eliciting the sound of stone grinding against stone. Yet, oddly enough, Peter didn't seem to show any signs of struggle opening the door like one would expect from something so heavy. As the door finally opened, the four of us saw stairs made of a dark stone that went down into the earth. The only light coming from more torches of foxfire that continued bathing the area in azure light. "Well, at least this place looks consistently creepy," Lucrute remarked, making us all smirk. "I think that most dungeons would probably be creepy," I retorted as we entered the doorway. With that, all four of us had entered the dungeon and slowly made our way down the stony steps. All of us made sure to keep our eyes open for traps, and it was lucky for us that we did. "Stop," Lucrute commanded, making us all freeze in place. We began looking around, wondering what danger might be near us. "Peter, the stone brick in front of your foot looks suspicious." Peter, Dine, and I then moved our eyes to the spot Lucrute was pointing out, making us understand what the archer meant. The azure light slightly obscured it, but the coloring to the brick was just a shade darker than all the other stone. In addition, it was slightly raised, whereas all the other steps of the stairs had perfectly level bricks. Too suspicious to be anything but a trap. "Good catch," Peter complimented as he stepped to the side of the suspicious brick and went down another step before stopping and examining the steps before continuing down. We all made sure to note where our leader walked before copying his steps. "Seems like this dungeon won't allow entering it to be easy," Dine remarked as we kept this cautious pace down the steps for a few more minutes. It was a good idea since we found 3 more trapped bricks before making it to the bottom of the stairs and into the first hallway of this dungeon. That was when we all heard a rattling noise echoing from down the hallway that seemed to be getting closer. "Everyone hear that?" Peter asked as he readied his sword. We all followed suit and I readied a firebolt in preparation. It was a good thing that we all did so as a squad of skeletons came into view wielding rusted swords and axes. "Lucrute, try to conserve your arrows if you can. We don't know how many of these things might be here and we don't know if you'll be able to recover your arrows." "Got it, Pete," Lucrute responded as he drew an arrow back, making the bow creak before letting it go. Impressively, the arrow he fired punched through the skull of one of the skeletons and made it through that of another. I joined him and launched my firebolt, in turn, blasting the skull of another skeleton apart. Peter and Dine stepped a few feet forwards, but remained close enough to Lucrute and I in case we needed aid. Lucrute took out another pair of skeletons with a single arrow while I blasted the skull of my second skeleton apart. That managed to lower the squad of skeletons from 10 to 4. Peter and Dine didn't charge the skeletons and waited for them to get closer. In fact, Peter took the few moments before the skeletons arrived to change his strategy. Due to knowing that his edged weapon was less useful against the skeletons, he quickly untied his sheath from his belt, stowed his blade back within it and wrapped the leather straps of his sheath around the hilt of his sword to keep it in place. Then, he gripped his weapon by the sheath and used it as an improvised hammer that he smashed into the skull of the skeleton, resulting in a loud crack. This crack was echoed by Dine's mace as it crushed the skull of another skeleton. Peter ducked under the swing of a rusted blade while Dine blocked an axe strike with the shaft of his mace. Then, Peter smashed his sword's crossguard into his enemy's bony knee, causing it to snap and making the skeleton fall. Following this, he struck the fallen skeleton's skull, ending it. At the same time, Dine swept his skeleton's feet out from under it before stomping his boot into the skeleton's skull, crushing it. More of these things are likely to start coming because of the noise. Dine warned as Lucrute and I rejoined our melee fighters. Then let's get moving. I have a feeling that these skeletons were just meant to feel out our strength, Peter said as we started walking down the hallway together. Lucrute made sure to collect his arrows from the skeletal corpses before putting them back into his quiver. A bit further down, the pathway split in two. Any ideas on which route to take? I asked as I examined each side. Both paths led to matching hallways that gave no hint on which path might be better. We didn't get long to contemplate our options as more rattling of bones came from the right hallway. Seems like our company is making the choice for us, Peter joked as we readied ourselves. As Lucrute and I readied an arrow and spell respectively, and all of us watched for more skeletons to approach from the right hallway, I felt 3 spikes of pain erupt in my back, followed by a spreading numbness. I reached behind my back and my hand brushed against something that I grabbed and pulled out before bringing it into view. It was a green dart with a feathered end. Noticing Lucrute doing the same, the pair of us had our gazes meet, horror filling our eyes as we understood what just happened. Guys! It's a trowper! I tried to shout as my tongue felt thick, the numbness quickly spreading through my body as I fell to the ground. Lucrute wasn't doing much better as he had fallen to a knee. My eyes glanced over to the left hallway, where I witnessed a cloaked figure having stepped off a pressure plate that had caused a section of ceiling to lower with tubes which likely had fired the darts at the pair of us. I heard Peter and Dine call out our names from what seemed like far away. I tried moving my gaze to my teammates as a blackness filled the corners of my vision. Seeing Peter and Dine's worried faces as they rushed over to Lucrute and I was the last thing I saw before darkness fully consumed my vision. I woke up with a deep gasp to see the blue sky outside the dungeon. Quickly sitting up, I found the others sitting around me with relief in their eyes as Kasha's voice filled my ears. "Welcome to the land of the living, kiddo. You all managed to last 15 minutes, she said with a warm tone as I turned to see her still sitting in that chair, a large smile on her face. What happened? I know that Lucrute and I got hit by some darts, and then I blacked out after that. I asked while rubbing my head. Sadly, Dine and I didn't last much longer after you and Lucrute went down. Peter answered while patting my shoulder. Turns out that the rattling wasn't even skeletons, it was actually a robed figure shaking some bone chimes together to distract us. It was meant to keep us from noticing the other asshole activating that dart trap that took the pair of you out. Moment that Dine and I focused on you two going down, the asshole with chimes activated the trap on his side that took us out as well. Seems like they utilized our expectations against us. Dine remarked with a chuckle. And what does this event teach all of you? Kasha asked us. Don't trust every noise. We all replied. Good. She clapped. Now, ready for round 2?